At this point, I would like to give credit to the Rhodesian forces and their modus operandi, which was unique to the Rhodesians and a major reason for their success, even being outnumbered by far, as became evident in the last couple of years of the war. Now, the following that I'm going to read here is an extract taken from Wikipedia, who best summed up the structure and modus operandi of the Rhodesian forces. I couldn't do it as good as they do it here. Can you tell me the years? 1972 to 1979. The Rhodesian Light Infantry, also known as the RLI, attracted volunteers from many countries. Though the majority of its members were Rhodesian, it was not a mercenary unit, as non-Rhodesians joined without seeking wealth and were paid the same as locals. From 1977, around half of the battalion consisted of Rhodesian conscripts who often served longer due to high turnover. The battalion had 4 commandos, each with 4 to 5 platoons called troops, and an average fighting strength of about 70 men per commando. The rank structure ranged from trooper to major. The RLI played a key role in the Bush War, the so-called Second Chimurenga, from the late 1960s until Zimbabwe's independence in 1980, exemplifying classic counterinsurgency warfare. The RLI's most characteristic deployment was the Fire Force Reaction Operation. This was an operational assault or response composed of usually a first wave of 32 soldiers carried to the scene by 3 helicopters and 1 DC-3, Dakota, also known as a DAC, with a command gun helicopter and a light attack aircraft in support. The later was a Cessna Skymaster, armed with 2 machine guns and normally 2 30mm rocket pods and 2 small napalm bombs made in Rhodesia and called Frantan. Frantan. The RLI became extremely adept at this type of military operation. The commando would be based at an airfield with usually 4 helicopters, 1 DC-3 DAC, and the Cessna known as the Lynx, affectionately known as the push-pull, or as we said in the local lingo, a donsa chova in the local vernacular, because of the front and rear mounting of the engines on the fuselage. One pulls and the other one pushes. Donsa chova. Then, of course, the Alouette Mark III, and occasionally a Bell Hueys in 1979 were used as helicopters. One was equipped with a 20mm cannon and designated the K-car, carrying the operation commander, while 3 G-cars carried 4 soldiers each, along with a pilot and technician. This dictated the combat structure of the commando into stops. Each stop had 4 soldiers, including a commander, a machine gunner, 2 riflemen with the necessary equipment. Stops 1 to 3 were in G-cars. Stops 4 to 8 were in the Dakota, which carried 5 stops in total. The first wave, consisting of 8 stops, 32 men, responded to enemy sightings within the fire force zone. They boarded their air vehicles or lorries, refueled helicopters. They boarded their air vehicles or lorries, refueled helicopters, and recovered deceased individuals. Successful operations depended on reliable enemy sightings and the skill of the fire commander, with the Selous scouts playing a crucial role in the former. With the Selous scouts playing a crucial role in the former. Wind direction, terrain, and enemy reaction were critical factors. Although the operational parachute jumps were significant, most troops were transported by helicopters. In the last 3 years of the war, the battalion's fire force operation resulted in around 3,000 enemy casualties, mostly from Zanla, which was the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, with the battalion suffering fewer than 200 casualties. 3,000 versus 200, not bad. A typical fire force involved a K car, 3 G cars, a Dakota, and a Lynx. Though variations occurred, the K car, the first to arrive, confirmed enemy location and planned the assault. G cars transported the first troops with stops to the scene, sometimes dropping them immediately, other times circling before making final decisions. The K car's helicopter gunner or technician used a 20mm cannon to engage the enemy with remarkable accuracy, flying in tight anti-clockwise circles just above the ground. The high-velocity shells were highly effective, leaving few survivors. G-car stops were strategically positioned in areas like stream beds or ridges to cut off enemy movement or to provide observation. Depending on the situation, the G-car stops would form the main sweep line instead of the Paras. The K-car, while searching for or engaging the enemy, decided where to drop the para stops and Lynx strikes. The K car, while searching for engaging enemy, decided where to drop the parastops and direct Lynx strikes. Drop zones, DZs, were determined by the enemy's position and terrain, with parastops sometimes dropped further away to be repositioned by the G cars. Paras were often fired at while descending. But this was ineffective. As a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody was ever shot and hurt jumping out of a plane. The main concern was the location of the main sweep. Ideally, the Paras would form the main sweep with G-car stopping, with G-car stops blocking. In practice, what am I trying to say now? In practice, variations existed. And the first wave of helicopter assaults in G cars were preferred by those seeking action. Each stop made a sweep when moving to new locations, often moving in line formation with spacing based on the terrain. In flatland, spacing would be up to 25 yards, while in heavy vegetation, it would be just a couple of yards. The primary tactic was to walk over the ground and observe, adjusting speed based on perceived enemy presence. Encounters with the enemy were swift, often resulting in immediate fatalities with prisoners taken where possible. Effective resistance from the enemy was rare. with only about 1 in 10 considered hardcore. Troopies also performed patrols, mostly in Rhodesia, Zambia, and Mozambique, often carrying over 100 pounds of equipment for extended periods. Patrols included ambushes, observation posts, and night marches requiring extreme discipline. Encounters with civilians were generally empathetic. Assaults on enemy bases in Zambia and Mozambique varied in success. Larger raids involved extensive planning and surprise, with the entire battalion participating. The effectiveness of these operations depended on various factors, including enemy resistance and political interference. Air power was crucial for the Fire Force operations, rendering them inconceivable without it. The enemy's lack of power and inability to down significant numbers of aircraft made Fire Force invincible, provided the infantry performed well. Circling helicopters masked the sound of attackers, allowing them to ambush defenders. The terrain varied, offering ample cover, but the challenge was confronting enemies hiding in houses, caves, or behind boulders. The Rhodesian Air Force's dedication ensured prompt support for the Army, even during patrols. Now they come to this following conclusion. This is Wikipedia. The Rhodesian Light Infantry excelled in diverse operations, regardless of transport or conditions. The enemy's disadvantages in communication and air support were significant, but the troops consistently pursued them, even when helicopters needed refueling. I'm not going to go into type of hand grenades and what others and that kind of thing. There's more factors here. What's that?
Was there something particularly interesting or unusual about the hand grenades?
As a what?
Was there something particularly interesting or unusual about the hand grenades versus regular?
No, not really. We're gonna. The Rhodesian forces mostly use 7.62 R1s, or otherwise known as FNFALs. The enemy, communist terrorists, used AK-47s, which was also 7.62 caliber, but of no, I'm just going to leave that out. Leave that out. The burst capability of the AK-47 was effective at short range, but the single-shot automatic FN was deadlier. Multiple bullet wounds from 7.62 round were more survivable than. They don't know what the long and the short one is. I'm not going to say this. Forget it. The training for the RLI was rigorous and included a 16-week course. Independent thought was encouraged, and bullying was rare. Recruits supported each other, and all training focused on infantry skills. From March 1968 to December 1979, 85 men were killed in action. We're talking about the Rhodesian Light Infantry. with most casualties occurring in the last 4 years of the war. The number of wounded is unknown, but one commando had over 50 wounded in 2 years. That was so good. Now, the following that I am going to read here is a tribute to the Women's Institute.
I'm gonna start that on the new.
Okay.